So this is the shoe plate. I'm just going to do this brogue shoe. I've dampened the leather and left it so that it's got kind of cool to the touch and it's a bit malleable. It's going to help me transfer my design. I've cut my template out and I've put sellotape over it so that it will kind of last a little bit longer while I'm putting it onto the slightly damp leather. I'm just going to fold it around the sides to keep it in this to the square. And then I'm also just going to put a little bit of masking tape over the corners and onto my block, my stone block, just to stop it moving. And that will allow me to do all my tooling work and my transfer of the design without it moving. So I'm going to use the ballpoint stylus, which has this rounded tip, and I'm going to just follow all the lines. You can kind of use it like a pen, but I do find you need to sort of go from side to side to kind of get the action. So taking your time and following the lines, try and keep a kind of logical order. It's also a good idea to ensure that you haven't got long fingernails or anything, because if you're pressing down into the leather with them, you're going to transfer that mark as well, which could get a bit confusing. So don't worry about all the fine details. At this stage, you just want the outlines, you want things that are going to give you the concept and structure of the design. I'm just going to put this sole in. And the more time you take at this stage, the more accurate you get these lines, the easier it will be to get the swivel knife into the lines and get it all looking neat. If you're going to do a few of these, you can put the sellotape on both sides or laminate your templates. That can be good, although laminating can make them a bit hard. You still want that softness to be able to press through into them. So generally sellotape or tracing paper is probably the best way forward. Once that's on in place, I'm going to just peel it back and take a look and make sure I've got enough of the detail that I want coming off of here. And I think that's fine. I'm going to take that off there for now and set it to one side. And I'm going to take up my swivel knife, and for this I've used the smaller 3mm blade. So I'm just going to position that on my finger and work in to those lines. Now depending when you cased it, you might find you need to recase the leather at this point. You want the leather to have a good moisture content, and you want to be following over those lines, neatening and keeping them as even as you can. And continue around on the letters as well. And then we're just going to look at this area here, and on the pattern we've got some stitch marks. So following all those lines, we're going to pop those in using the scratch awl tip, so it's a bit finer. So you're just taking little dashes reasonably deep into the leather and just trying to get them as even as you can to look like nice even stitches. If you'd rather not do this by eye, you can go back to the template, place it back over, make sure it's in the right positions and it's sitting over. You should be able to feel the grooves. So using the ski slope of the beveling tool, this deeper angle is going to be what I push into that swivel knife cut. So move that out of the way a minute. So hitting that into that angle creates this shadow down below. So it's going to make the shoe look more 3D, more leap out from the surface. And I think for this bit, to show that that's an inside, I'm going to use the backgrounder tool. So I'm going to use the point to start into here. And then depressing that inside section. And that gives us this sense of it being the inside darker part of the shoe. And you can use the tip to get it. Maybe just do a little tap either side of these lace bits. And that's going to make those look a little bit more pronounced. So it's just using the beveler to pronounce up the lacing. And now I need to put some dots. I'm going to join and scribble that down a bit as well, just to make that line a little bit firmer, to show the two sections. And now I've got my brogue pinholes to pop in. So I'm going to go back here and look for the pattern. So we've got a sort of circle coming down from here. So I'm going to do this with I'm going to try it maybe with yes, I think I might use the stylus if the leather's soft enough. Let me give it a light tap. I wouldn't normally use a stylus this way, but it's giving quite a nice effect. And then we'll do the bigger one in the centre there. And then follow the rest of the pattern. It's always worth at the end just picking the swivel up and just seeing if you need to tidy over any lines where maybe you've gone over the edge with one of the tools, just to bring back that sharp effect. And there we go. And my last thing I'm going to do is just to create a little bit as if there was a bit of a shine or a bit of use of it. I'm just going to take this rounded pear shader and just give it a little gentle bash in a couple of areas. Usually around the toe and the heel is enough. It's just a bit less is more, but it just gives that kind of sense of it. And then I'm on to my letters. So as I say, you can use your freehand groover as a pen and carve those out if you feel comfortable. Give it a practice first. It's a bit of a trick to it. I've gone round with the swivel knife here because these are quite nice thick letters. You can make any font you want for this. You can make it as somebody's name. So what I'm going to do to make this stand out and emphasize is I'm going to use the backgrounder tool to just get that nice and a bit stronger emphasis for when I colour it. Also, this will give me a point that's depressed, so when I go to colour it will automatically come out darker even if I put one colour on and go over the whole thing, and it will also allow, if I do put a different colour into the lettering, it will allow a little sort of recess centre for it to sit in, so we go quite deep. And work your way around your lettering. So now I'm going to do some colouring. You can just literally cover over this with an Eco Flow Antique Gel or any of the Phoebing's Antique Paste, just for a more subtle thing. But I'm just going to add a little bit of subtle colour. So I've just watered down some of the Raven Black, and I'm just going to really carefully paint in a little pooling into the background of the word. That should just make this pop a bit when we put the other colours in. And we do sell some really good fine paintbrushes for doing this. This is now these are wax based, so you want to kind of not layer up too much on it, because when you go to rub it, it's going to sit fresh on top of the surface. You want to rub it to get it into all the carving and tooling that you've done, but you don't want it to smear too much to the outside. So what I'm probably going to do in a moment is just going to get some on and then kind of carefully wipe it back before I go to rub on the brown, because the brown I'm going to put all over the whole thing, so I don't want too much smudging. I think it might be kind of nice to have a little bit in here, a little bit heavier into that dark. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up a bit of my sponge now and just lift off any bits that are sitting too heavily on, just so they don't smudge. Don't worry if it looks a little bit uneven at this point. We're going to polish into it and over dye with the brown. I'm going to put little points for those laces just there. There we go. Okay, so that's my mahogany, and now I'm going to go back, ball up this cloth again, and now I'm going to go for the whole thing. So I'm just going to use this brown, and I'm just going to go over the whole of the leather, working in circular movements. And you want to be pushing this wax into any of the channels you've made in this stitching, in the backgrounding. So you can go kind of heavier with this one, and as I say, work it in the circles over. Probably best to wear gloves even with these. These ones have got dye pigment in. So you can start to see as I'm pushing the pad into these lines, they're picking out this dark spot. So I'm going to try and get a little bit more for the broguing, to show the broguing up. Really pushing that down into those crevices, and that gives you your highlight and your contrast. And I love these because you get this much more mellow effect than if you're just doing a dye colour pattern, and it's a little bit more forgiving. So we've got kind of this hint of this red with the brown on top. We've just got this brown background, and we've got this lovely kind of waxy feel that's going to buff up really nicely. So just really working it in, making sure you've got it in all the bits and pieces that you want before you buff. Now at this point as well, because this is just going on to the stitch bag and it's not going to have anything particularly in need of a sealed edge, I'm just going to use a little bit of this wax to go around and use that to wax my edges. So when you're doing this, work in one direction, and that wax content in the antique gel, antique paste is kind of smoothing down the edge, and then I can give a quick run over that with the slicker, and that will help those edges to seal and burnish in just a very simple way without making it too complicated. Okay, let's pop it down there. You can see it's drying back. You're getting some lovely rich tones coming through. Oh, it's come quite pleased with that. It's come out quite nicely. I'll just do a little tiny go back over with this mahogany just into that centre, just to pick out a little bit before I polish it off, just to give it some greater richness. Stitching the plate onto the calico bag, just some tips for doing that. I'm going to use back stitch. So what I've done is I've marked onto the calico with pencil the corners of the plate of where I want it, and you'll see I positioned it a little bit higher up nearer to the top, and then centered across here. So just get your measurements, work out, put your pencil marks in of where you want it to be. I've also used some double-sided sticky tape in the middle just to keep it in position, and then I tacked in the four corners just with one loose stitch doubled over around, just to keep everything in position and keep it flat while I was working on it, flat down. Now the needle I'm using is from the assorted needle pack, which has some really useful needles, got some curved needles as well. It's very similar to a usual leather needle in terms of size, has a nice large eye, but it has a sharp point rather than a blunt point. Now because of that, you just need to take care, not any of your fingers, but also that you don't scratch the top surface of the leather when you're going through. So it's kind of a bit awkward because you're working into the back part of the bag. So I've got this one started, so I'll show you how I've been doing it. So with back stitch, you're doing your one back, two forward, one back. So my stitch now is there. So in order to get it, I'm going to pop my needle through the next hole down I want from the front. Although my thread is on the back of the fabric, which is where your knot will be when you start, I'm going to push the needle through the calico, piercing through the calico, and then when I turn round I can see a pinhole prick at the back here, and I know that's where I need to come through with my needle. And now I go back a stitch. I'm not pulling it over tight because I don't want the fabric to pucker up. The fabric is thinner and lighter, and if you pull too tight the fabric will pucker and not sit nicely. Now each time I'm doing it, I'm spreading with my fingers the calico on the back of the plate here so that I get it very flat and nicely lined up. And I'm finding my next hole down, which is job I've got my glasses on there. Nope, it's the next one down. There we go. And just make sure you don't catch it around the drawstring and get a little bit in the way. Ah, no. What I went to do there was just to show you the pinhole prick, but I've actually gone all the way through because I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm just going to unthread the needle. It's good to show you what to do if it goes a bit wrong. Unthread the needle, and I've got a nice, not quite sure how much it will show on the camera there, but I've got a pinhole prick just there with my dirty fingernail. So I now know that if I put that needle through there, it's going to come all the way through the leather, and then back stitch one. And then next hole from the top, and you can carry on sewing round. Now what you'll find when you've done this, when you've finished, and to finish, I'm just going to take my threads and thread them back through up on here. I've got a little way to go yet, but you'll see the back stitched on. Just going to tuck that out of the way a second. So this is the bag finish. Now, because you've been reaching in a lot, you might find that you've creased the calico. So a nice little finish off is just to give it a little bit of an iron, carefully pressing around. You can place it down and press on the back, pressing the leather, but best to try to get round the leather and just try to make sure that you don't pucker it. And then your shoe bag is ready to give.